When you launch Maptitude, you are presented with a quick start. The quick start contains a variety of startup options. The default startup option is to map your own data, and that is what we will begin with in our webinar today. I'm going to click OK. The first thing I'm going to do is browse for the file which contains the data that I would like to map. I have an Excel spreadsheet which contains some customers that I would like to take a look at. I've identified that sheet, and I'm going to click Open. In the Choose Excel sheet, I simply will click OK. The Create a Map wizard begins the process by scanning the fields which are in your spreadsheet. It uses the first row of the spreadsheet, assuming that it contains field names for your data. Using those field names, Maptitude attempts to appropriately match each of your fields with the most common fields that would be used with locational data, those being street address, city, state, zip code, so on and so forth. Maptitude does its best to properly match these fields. In the case of my data, my fields were named in a similar fashion to what Maptitude was looking for. If my fields were named in a customized way or did not contain any field names at the beginning, then I can identify the proper matches by clicking on any field and clicking the down arrow. This will present a full list of fields, and I can choose my field as appropriate. All of these fields are matched correctly, so I'm going to click the Next button to continue to the next screen. Based upon the fields that you identify on the first screen, Maptitude presents you a variety of types of maps that it will create. In my case, my data contain street addresses, and I do want to locate these data by address. That is the default option, which is currently highlighted. There is a sample image of what your map might look like when you locate your data. All locate options do place a point on the map representing each record of your data. Each of the map types are described on the left under the image which corresponds to the map type. I'm going to click Next. At this point, Maptitude would like to know which of my fields contain a unique numeric identifier. In my data, this field is customer ID, and Maptitude has properly identified that. If it cannot detect a numeric field, Maptitude will select No, let Maptitude create one for me. If you receive this selection, you should just go ahead and go with that. In this case, we're going to just click Next. I'm now being prompted for the name of the file that will be created, which contains the locations of each of my customers. I'm going to put this data in the same location where my spreadsheet is saved. Now that I have told Maptitude the type of map that I would like to create, in this case I would like to locate all of my data by their address, I receive additional options for how I can display this data when my map is created. A variety of themes are presented as an option. I'm going to create a color theme using the data contained in my spreadsheet. A color theme will color each dot for each of my records differently based upon the underlying data for whatever field I select. Choosing color theme updates the image that is shown to the left and also updates the description shown below the image. I want to create my theme on my first quarter sales, so I can select that field. I would also like to display labels for this particular data set when my map is created, so I'm going to check Display Labels. Maptitude defaults to the first field, which is customer name, and that field is fine for these purposes. I'm going to click Next. I can choose to do a variety of analysis on my data. That's not something that I want to pursue at this time, so I'm just going to click Next again. And I'm done with all of the options for the Create a Map wizard, and I'm now going to click Finish so that my map will be created. Maptitude goes through the geocoding process to attempt to locate all of the records that were in my Excel sheet. When that process completes, I will receive a results report. This results report indicates that I have 4,800 records for my Colorado customers file. Of those 4,800 records, 4,747 records were located. 53 were not located. All of those records did have valid IDs. Almost all of them were street addresses. 2 of them were intersections. Maptitude can map intersections if you do not have street addresses. If you know that a particular data point is located at the intersection of Main and 1st Street, you can use that as opposed to a standard street address. Clicking OK will dismiss the report and allow your map to draw. All of my data have concentration in the Colorado area, so when my map drew, it did focus on the area where my points are located. I want to start by zooming in a bit to see a little bit more of my data. And I can zoom in using the Zoom In tool, which is located in the Tools toolbox on the right-hand side of my screen, magnifying glass with a plus sign. Activating that tool and moving my cursor over the map will turn my cursor into a tool which matches that in the toolbox. Currently, my scale is 1 inch is equal to 12 miles. Maptitude is set by default to increase the scale by a factor of 2 when clicking with the Zoom In tool. When I click, my scale was increased, and I can now see 1 inch is equivalent to 6 miles. I can also zoom by clicking and dragging a box for whatever area I would like to get more detail on. When I let go of my mouse, the map redraws focused on the area that I outlined. If I like the scale which I am centered at, but would like to move to a different part of the map, I can do that using the Pan tool, which is the tool that looks like a hand in the Tools toolbox. Activating the Pan tool and moving my cursor to the map gives me a tool that looks like the one in the toolbox, a hand. I can simply click and drag in order to move my map around without changing the scale. If I would like to zoom out to be able to see more features with less detail, I can do this with the Zoom Out tool in the Tools toolbox on the right side of my screen. Clicking on the map will show me more features. This functionality is also contained in the scroll wheel on your mouse, if your mouse has a scroll wheel. Rolling your scroll wheel backwards will zoom out to give you more detail. Rolling your scroll wheel forward or away from your body will zoom in to give you more detail. Holding the scroll wheel down and moving your mouse will pan. These are good tools to know for moving around your map when you're using other tools within Maptitude, such as selection or map editing tools. If you find that you've zoomed in and out a bit and just want to get back to where you were a few minutes previous, you can do that with the previous scale tool, which is located in the Tools toolbox. Clicking the previous scale tool will take you back through your previous zoom levels. What I would like to do now is I would like to change my map so that the stars that are representing my customers are changed to a circle instead. The Display Manager on the left side of the screen contains a listing of all of the layers that are contained in this map. These layers are ordered in the same order that they are drawn on the screen. My data is the last thing listed, and it gets the most precedence in the way that this map looks. The Display Manager allows me to customize the way the map looks in a variety of ways. One of the things I can do is change the symbols for any layer, change the style for any layer. And I can do that by clicking on the symbol to the left of the layer name. My data are your data. I want to click on this star. That opens the style for that layer. And I can change the symbol for my customers to any symbol in any icon font that I have available on my computer. I'm going to choose a closed circle that is slightly smaller than the default symbol of a star. Clicking Apply will apply my changes and leave the dialog box open. Clicking OK will apply my changes and close the dialog box. So I've now changed my symbols from stars to circles. I would also like to change the way that my labels look. I don't like the blue. It doesn't go with my green colors very well. So I'm going to also change the label color. This can be done through the Display Manager as well. And I will do this by clicking on the label icon that is in line with the layer that I want to change. When I click on the label icon, I can see that my customers are labeled by customer name. And currently the font is blue. I would like to change that to black. I will click OK to apply my changes and close the dialog box. Finally, as I look at my map, the colors that were selected as the default for this theme don't pop out very well on this particular map. The greens just really aren't showing. So the next thing that I would like to do is change those colors for my theme so that the points stand out and have a greater visual impact. To do this, I can double-click on Theme in my Display Manager. Theme is nested underneath your data. It is a feature that is within that. Double-clicking on Theme will open the Color Theme dialog box. I can change the styles by clicking the Style tab. There are a variety of ways to change the styles for themes. I'm going to scroll through the pre-made color sets that are included with Maptitude using the previous and next buttons until I have selected a color set which I think is suitable for my data. I can change the from and to values as I wish from the drop-downs, or I can change these one at a time by selecting the color for each individual class. I'm going to click OK. OK applied my changes, and my points stand out a bit more on my map. I want to see how this map looks since I've made my changes to the style, changes to the color theme, and changes to the labels. And what I want to see is how my map will look compared to what it looked like when it initially opened. I will use the Initial Scale button to zoom me back out to the view that the map had when it first opened. The Initial Scale button will take you to the last saved view of the map if you have saved the map subsequent to opening it. So now I can see all of my customers showing on this map. I can see all of their labels and the variety of colors. Having played around a bit more with this map and thinking about what I might want to see, I think that my map looks a little cluttered. I don't like the way the labels look. They're kind of all over the place and not really terribly helpful at this point in time. So what I want to do is I want to start by removing these labels. I can do that in the Display Manager by moving my mouse over to the label icon, which is in line with the layer Your Data, and clicking on that icon. You can remove labels for any layer by opening the Labels dialog in the way I just indicated and clicking the Remove button. My map is now a little bit cleaner. I like it better than I did before. But I think that I also want to go ahead and remove my theme. I don't think that it's quite the way I want to convey my message. I just at this point want to see where the customers are located. I can remove the theme in the Display Manager by right-clicking on Theme, which gives me the context-sensitive menu, and I can choose the option to remove. I'm prompted to confirm that I really do want to remove the theme. When I click Yes, the points remain, and they're all colored the same in the blue shade that I initially selected. We've looked at using the Create a Map wizard to locate my data by address. What I'd like to do next is I'd like to use the Create a Map wizard to locate my data by attaching it to the zip codes. So I want Maptitude to summarize this point data that I have, where I have one record for each customer. I want that data to be summarized by zip code, so I can get a nice overview of the area and understand what my sales figures actually look like. To do this, I'm going to go to the File menu and choose New, or I could go to the New File button in the toolbar. Either way will take me to the New File dialog box. I do want to create a map and click OK. I'm going to create a map of my own data and browse for my Colorado customers sheet. I'll click Next to get my field listing. This is the same file as before, so I know these fields are okay. I'm going to click Next again. This is the same list of options that I had before because it's the same data file. But this time, rather than locating my data, which provides points on the map as the one that's in the background, this time I want to show a layer with my data attached to it, in this case zip codes. So I want Maptitude to summarize my data by attaching it to geographic boundaries. I'm going to click Next, and I can create a color theme again. I want to do this because I do want to see my first quarter sales. So I'm going to create a color theme on my Q1 sales. And this time, rather than displaying customer name, which doesn't really make sense because that's an aggregate, what I want to do is I want to display the total Q1 sales. So I'm going to pick that from the list. When I click Next, there are no more options. Clicking Finish is going to go through and attach my data to the map and draw the map. So here I have my map of the Colorado area, and I have each of the zip codes colored by their first quarter sales. The color palette that was used does correspond to the last color palette that I was using in my previous map. So those points that I used, I had selected this kind of rainbow palette. I think it's a little too dark for my needs at this point, so I'm going to change the colors for this theme. And again, we'll do that by double-clicking on the theme line for the layer which contains the theme. Clicking Styles will let me see each of the classes for this theme. I'm going to go and find a slightly milder palette of colors than this rainbow. I think I'm going to go ahead and use these greens and click OK. So changing the color had a pretty large impact on the way my map looks. I can see that my highest sales are darker green and my lowest sales are lighter green. I think that this is a little bit easier to read, and I can quickly digest what these data are. More importantly than me digesting it, anybody I'm sharing the map with should be able to quickly understand what they're looking at. I'm going to go ahead and zoom into the Denver area just to take a look here. And as I do, I can see that I have some numbers on the map, and I remember that I had decided to label using my Q1 sales. Right now, it's not obvious these are Q1 sales because it's just a string of numbers. In this case, it's 615, 088, and 199, 3679. I would really like for this to be formatted with $ and commas. I can do that very easily by going back to the Display Manager and choosing my label settings for the zip code layer. By clicking on that label icon, I can change the format to something that has a $ and a comma. I'm also going to change my color because that brown's not really standing out so much. Try gray instead. When I click OK, the map redraws, and I have a $ with a comma for each of these figures. It's a lot more readable. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out to my initial map so I can see that again. And you might notice that when I did this, my labels have disappeared. And I really might like to see them at this scale. I'm not sure, but I think I do. So how do I get these labels to show? Looking at the Display Manager, My label icon, which a minute ago when I was zoomed in looked like this one, now has a magnifying glass inside. What that indicates is that the labels have auto scale, and that means that the labels will automatically turn on and off as I zoom in and out to some pre-specified scales. I just want these labels to be on all the time. I can change the setting, which is having them draw based upon my zoom level. And to do that, I'm going to click on the label icon to open my labels dialog box that we just had open a minute ago. And I'll click on the Overlaps tab. The auto scale for the labels, the thing that's making them show and hide automatically, is located in the auto scale section of the Overlaps tab. By clicking Clear, I remove those settings, and the labels will draw all the time. So my map is a lot more readable. The last thing I'm thinking for this particular map is that I like it, but I'd really like to have the customers on it that I had on the other map. And I can do that pretty easily in Maptitude by going to the Map menu and choosing the option to combine existing maps. This will provide a listing for me of all of the layers that are available in my Maptitude workspace. They're automatically selected by default. All of them, I can remove any that I want. By clicking OK, I'm going to get a new map, a third map, which is a combination of my initial map with my customers and of my second map with my aggregated sales. I've concluded all of the topics that I wanted to go over in session 1. So I'm going to start the question and answer period. Please feel free to ask questions, and I will read them aloud and answer them one by one. So the first question that I see is, after building a map, can you modify the initial data on the spreadsheet, add or remove, and then update the map when the spreadsheet changes? And the answer to that question is not really. The way that Maptitude is designed is that it takes that Excel data and then it puts it into a format that Maptitude can read. So if you make changes to the Excel sheet, the best way to proceed is to use the wizard to map your data again. Alternately, you can make changes to your data that you're mapping directly in Maptitude. So in this display manager, I see your data. If I right-click on that, I can choose New Data View, which will open a view of my data. So this is not the Excel sheet anymore. It's an imported version of the Excel sheet. And this is all of my data as I have it. If the address for one of these locations is different, I can simply type in the corrected address, say that this is 5410 Wadsworth Ave. I can add that in, and then I can go through and remap the data using Maptitude. If this is simply sales data that I'm looking to change, I can go in and type in the Q1 sales directly and make whatever modifications I want to there, or make modifications to the name. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next question. And that question is, how can you keep your themes when exporting to Google Earth as a KML file? It's a really good question. KML files support generally a base color. They can support multiple colors. I don't believe that themes actually stick for that. But what I'll do, since we're here and we're in our question and answer session, is I'm going to hide everything but my zip codes and my selected zip codes, maybe just the ones on the screen. So let me go through in this map and turn some layers off. And I'm doing this by clicking on the green checks in my display manager. Once they're red X's, these layers are still in the map. They're just not drawing anymore. So here I have just zip codes. I don't want to export all of that layer to KML. I go to Tools, Export, and actually have to turn those off the way it used to be. Sorry about that. I go to Tools, Export, and choose KML, and only export the data from my customers. Let's to see what happens. So when I go into Google Earth at this point, after I have created that file, I can open up the KML file that I just created. And let's take a peek at what it looks like. So I did have a theme, and it looks like that theme was retained. The labels were retained as well, so that's pretty handy. Hopefully that answers your questions. If you have any need to change those themes, that can be done via the standard utilities in Google Earth. The next question I have is, when using the selection tool, how do you clear a specific selection that's already been made? And we're going to get into the selection tool next. Actually, what we're going to do in our next session is to look at selecting some features in order to create districts. So we'll hit upon that in the next section. The second part of that question was also, when selecting, is there a way for Maptitude to show a list of what's been selected? That's a great question. There is actually in Maptitude 2013, which is the current version of the software, there is a way, a setting that you can make that actually can prevent you from including multiple features or the same feature in multiple selection sets. And we'll certainly talk about that and how to adjust that setting. It's a brand new feature. So a lot of you that don't have 2013 or are new to 2013 probably haven't seen it in action, so we'll take a look at that as well. I think I've finished all the questions that have been submitted. I don't see any others. I'll give you just a couple more seconds to think if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask. And if you don't, then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move on to our next session, which will also be followed by a Q&A. So there's not going to be any problem with waiting if something comes up that hasn't been answered yet. So I don't see any more questions. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and go on to our next session. So here I have in front of me my Colorado customers aggregated by their zip code. And I like it fine, but I have some other things that I want to define. And one of the things that I want to define are my sales regions. My sales regions are multiple zip codes. So what I need to be able to do is to be able to somehow get this into Maptitude. I don't have a real good list. I don't have a layer. I know what zip codes are assigned to what person. And I have it written on a sheet of paper here in front of me. So I don't have any Excel file to refer to or anything like that. This is all going to be a manual process. So what I can do in Maptitude is I can define any territories or districts based upon geography. That's a polygon, a closed area like a zip code. And I can do that by creating what are called selection sets. Selection sets in Maptitude are kind of like filters in Excel or queries in Access. So you can have features in multiple queries or in multiple filters depending on what your criteria are. You can also manually select things on the screen, and that's what I'm going to do to start out with. Because I know that my data are comprised of zip codes, my territories, I want to make sure that I have the right layer set as my working layer. And the working layer is a concept we haven't touched upon yet, but it's very important to your use in working with Maptitude. The working layer is the layer that you're actively making changes to, be it through a theme or through labels. The display manager makes a lot of this easy, so the working layer isn't such a big deal to have to deal with because you have the icons right in line with your layers. However, the selection toolbox, which is mine is docked here, is specifically tied to the working layer. The working layer is indicated in the display manager in bold, so the 5-digit zip code is the working layer. And for those of you that have had Maptitude for a long time before the display manager was around, the working layer is listed in this drop-down at the top of your map, which shows you all of the layers which are drawing. I only have one layer drawing now, so that's why it's the working layer. You'll notice also in the display manager, all these other layers are grayed out, and that's because they aren't drawing. They have those red X's. So I have zip code as my working layer. And this is also indicated in my selection toolbox because it tells me the 5-digit zip code is the working layer right away. What I did previously, and I'm going to do again, is I had this toolbox docked on the left side of my screen just to take up a little bit less screen real estate. So what I want to start by doing is thinking about what regions I want to create. And I actually want to create, I think, 3 regions. I want to create a region for Denver, I want to create a northern region, and I want to create a southern region. There are a couple of ways to create selection sets. If you're not worried about the names, you can use the quick Create New Selection tool in the Selection toolbox. I know that I want to create 3 sets, and I want them to be named very specifically. So I actually want to open the selection settings, which is going to give me a bit more control. And I'm going to do this by clicking on the Selection Settings button, which is in the Selection toolbox. You can also get to this by going to the Selection menu and choosing Settings. Both of these will take you to the same place. So remember, these selection sets are like filters. You're able to filter your geography. I'm going to create a new set by clicking the Add Set button. My first set is going to be named Denver. So that's going to be all of the zip codes that are included in my Denver territory. Clicking OK will change that name. I'm going to add another new set and click Rename to name it Denver North. And a third set, which will be named Denver South. So I now have 3 selection sets. Selections are interesting because they're kind of like layers in that you can have multiple selections for one layer, and they can be active or inactive. So in this case, I have 3 selection sets which are active. That means they're going to draw on the map. Then I have some inactive ones that are not going to change the way that the map looks. Functionally, this doesn't matter a whole lot. Once we start adding features and other layers, I may want to be able to turn the view of these selections on and off so that they don't draw in a different color, even though the list of zip codes that are included in each set will still be accessible. We'll try and remember to take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and click Close because I've created the sets that I'm going to put features into. And you'll see that in the Selection toolbox, my changes, my new sets, are now added. I'm going to start with the Denver set. Currently has 0 features. And I'm going to zoom into the Denver area. And the drop down below Denver will let me create a running total. So if I wanted to try and create my districts based upon my Q1 sales, I could do that. And there's also this Options button. And this goes back to what somebody asked in our previous Q&A session, which was, how can I make sure that a feature is only in one set or allow it to be in multiple sets? This is that new thing that was added for Maptitude 2013, and these are selection options. So by default, Maptitude is set so that you can't select features that are already part of another set. So in this case, I have this Your Data, and it's going to prevent me from selecting anything because it's a selection set of its own. I'm going to go ahead and remove features from other sets. And what that's going to allow me to do is select features that are already in another set, but it will take them out of that other set, so there's no duplication. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And we'll talk for a second about the various selection tools. The Selection toolbox contains a variety of tools for selecting geography. These are geographic selections. The first of which is a cursor with an asterisk. And this will allow me to click on any feature to select it. Next to that is the cursor with a square. That allows me to select by rectangle. I can simply click and drag to select a group of features. If I held the Shift key, I don't know if you can see here at the bottom, but this is a perfect square. So holding the Shift key will make your shape a perfectly symmetrical, if that makes a difference. The Select by Circle tool is the next one. That's the cursor with the circle. This tool will allow you to click and drag out a circle, selecting everything that's touching the circle, or to click at any location and enter a radius in whatever unit is selected from the drop-down list. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm using my scroll wheel because it makes things a lot easier. And I'm just going to work on defining this area a bit more. I'm going to use a fourth tool to select by shape, which allows me to draw a freehand polygon. If I click on the map, I can just move my mouse, click in a shape point, continue clicking to select my zip codes, and then double-click to close the shape. So let's see how my Denver district looks. And it's actually a little bit bigger than I want it to be. So how do I go about removing zip codes now that I have them added? You use these same selection tools. I'm going to use Select by Pointing. But if you hold the Control key on your keyboard, it will take a feature out of the selection set. So I can cull this set down a bit to what I know is the correct area for my region. I got a little out of hand there when I was selecting. So this is my Denver region. It has 112 zip codes in it. Now I'm going to go on and I'm going to create Denver North. So I choose Denver North from the drop-down, choose any selection tool that I want, and I'm going to just go draw anywhere through a zip code just so long as my line is within the zip code in order to select the ones that should be in my region. Double-clicking to close. So this is my Denver North region. It has 80 zip codes. And my last will be my Denver South. I'm going to use the same method that I just used for Denver North. And so my Denver South region is defined as well. I now have 3 regions. And for each region, the thing I forgot to point out is the quarter-1 sales has been summed. So I have 116 zip codes in Denver South with a quarter-1 total sales of $2,918,070. For Denver North, $9,602,238. And for Denver with $44,113,863. So now that I have all of these areas defined, I want to turn them into my sales territories, into my districts. And I'm going to do that by going to the Tools menu and choosing Geographic Analysis. Under Geographic Analysis is the Create Districts tool. What this tool will do is it will create districts either from a table, if I had a freehand table with a list of zip codes and their corresponding districts, which, as I explained, I didn't, or from selection sets. And I have these selection sets here. I'm going to actually call this Colorado Territories. And I can use any of the selection sets that are on my 5-digit zip code layer. In this case, I don't care about this Your Data thing, but I do care about Denver, Denver North, and Denver South. So what I did was I clicked on Denver and I dragged all the way down to Denver South in order to select all of these features. When I click OK, I'm prompted for a name for these territories. Maptitude came up with the one that it thought would be useful. It happens to match the layer name that I put in. And I'm going to make sure that this location is correct and click Save. So Maptitude's going to go through and turn these features which are selected into a new layer. And to do that, it's going to take all of the features which are together and touching and squeeze them together into one big boundary. And it will do that for each of my selection sets. If I would have had a zip code that was kind of hanging out by itself, it was a bit disparate, then in that case, it would still be hanging out by itself, but it would be part of the bigger area when selected. I can see here I forgot some zip codes. If I wanted to go through and recreate these territories, I could. So what happens when Maptitude creates this districts or territories layer is it automatically creates a theme based upon the district name, Denver South, Denver, or Denver North, and it colors it in. It's kind of hard to see these colors now because the selection sets I made on the zip codes, they're still showing. So what I'm going to do in the display manager, I'm going to click on the plus sign to expand the zip code layer. I'm going to click on the plus sign to expand the sets list. And I'm just going to click on the green check to make each of these sets inactive. So now I can more easily see the colors that have been assigned to my districts. I have my Denver North. I have my Denver South. I think I'm going to change a little bit, have a little reminder here on styles. I don't like the green boundary for my districts, so I click on the green next to Colorado territories. I'm going to change this to black and click OK. I don't like the green labels, so I'm going to click on the label icon next to Colorado territories and change the color from green to black. And one other thing, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but my label for Denver here is missing. It's just not showing at all. And part of this is because Maptitude is trying to label these zip codes with their sales values as well. So there's not enough room to label everything. What I can do to show my Denver label, if I go to the Map menu and choose Display Hidden Labels, this shows me a whole bunch of stuff. My map looks messy now. If you've done this with highways, you know that it looks really strange once you do it with highways. But I zoom in, and I can see Denver now. And I'm going to use my Custom Labels tool and right-click on this. And I want to prioritize this label so it always draws. Let me see how this map looks now. So if I zoom back out, I don't see a lot of change. Let's uncheck this Display Hidden Labels. And when I do, you can see now that Denver is drawing. It has a lot more prominence. Actually, I'm going to make these labels a little bigger too, so they really pop out on my map. So making a few minor changes to styles and labels can have a huge impact on the way that your map looks. I've done everything that I wanted to do for creating my territories. I like this. I actually think that this map doesn't look too bad. Now, if I wanted to add my customers onto this map, I can still do that by using this map, combine existing maps again, click OK. Did I get my your data was already there, I think. So I can turn that layer back on, and maybe what I really want is some small, itty-bitty squares for my customers in a different color. And all of these things are easy to change, take a little tweaking. The more you do, the more comfortable you're going to feel in making these changes. So my map is finished. The next thing I want to talk with you about are network bands. And network bands allow you to distinguish a travel area based on travel time. And what I want to do is I just wanted to show you network bands by focusing on my top customers in Denver. So I'm going to create a new map using the Create a Map wizard. And I'm going to use a different file than my Colorado customers. I'm just going to look at my top Denver customers. So I'm going to map these customers by their address. And all of them were found. Here's my new map. And my customers are mostly located in the downtown Denver area. So I want to create some drive time bands, and I want those to be at 5-minute intervals from 5 to 15 minutes so that I can see what the distance is, what the streets are that each of my customers can drive on in that 5 minutes. So where can they travel? To do this, I'm going to go to the Tools menu, and I'm going to choose the Routing menu, and then choose Network Bands. Because I'm in a close area, I don't have a ton of points, I'm going to use the street layer. If I were using nationwide or even a few counties with more points, I might want to use the highway layer instead, but for this purpose, this is completely suitable. My next step is I want to specify my origin set, and to do that, I can click the Select Origin Set button, and this will let me pick any layer. I want to use my Denver customer layer, and I do want to create bands with a travel time of 5 minutes each with a maximum of 15. All of my settings are correct. So all that's left was for me to create the network bands by clicking on this blue button, the diamond, I guess it's yellow in multiple colors. And so what Maptitude does is it goes through and it's reading all of the streets and figuring out travel times and how long it will take for each of those points in order to go the specified 5-minute intervals as indicated. So the process has completed. I'm going to move this toolbox off to the side. And so I can see that these yellow areas are the areas that are within 5 miles of each of my top customers, 5 minutes. The next darker color, the kind of peachy color, are between 5 and 10 minutes drive time for each of my customers. And then the darkest is 10 to 15 minutes for each customer. So it's a nice way to be able to analyze the area that each of my customers can travel within a specified time. So I've gotten all the information that I want. The last thing that I do want to do for these bands, this is a temporary layer. It's not actually saved. I do want to save it. So I can do that by clicking the Save Network Bands layer. I'm going to call these Denver Travel Bands. This is now a layer in my map. It's called Network Bands. So if I save this map and come back to it later, everything will be just as I left it. So having been through these topics, I have completed the second session of the topics that I wanted to cover. And I'm going to move on to the question and answer session again. So I'm going to start with that. It looks like we have a good number of questions this time. So we'll do our best to get through those. I'm being asked if we can see an example using a map of Brazil. Regrettably, for this particular introductory webinar, we are focusing on the U.S. We do offer a variety of one-on-one training classes, so we could take an opportunity to schedule one of those with you. Alternately, we may at some point create a webinar that's focused on Brazil. I'm sorry we're not able to get to that today. The next question is asking the difference between inactive and invisible. It's an excellent question. In order to address that, I'm going to hide this network bands layer and go back to the zip code layer where we had those selection sets. So I've just turned the zip code layer back on. I'm going to zoom out so that we can see a bit more. And let's actually take a look at the difference between inactive and invisible. Right now, these icons are the gray circle with the white dash. If you're not sure what that means, we can double check, but that is indeed the inactive icon. So what inactive means is that those particular features are still drawn on the map, but they're not shaded any differently. So we move to the Denver area. I think we'll be able to see this a little bit better. So if I change the status of Denver, now this is invisible. That's what the red circle with the white X is. And all of the zip codes that were in Denver, they've disappeared. They are completely gone. So the difference between inactive and invisible is that inactive allows something to draw on the map without changing the way that it's shaded, where invisible removes those features from the map altogether. So here it is back on with the shading, and here it is inactive, so it's on without the shading. The next question is that it looked like I included some zip codes that were both in Denver North and Denver South. And the question is if it's possible to do that, or if this is something that Maptitude prevents. That's a great question. One of the things that we haven't done, mostly as a constraint of time, is to look at the underlying data. And what I want to do is go ahead and look at the data. We've looked all at geography so far. I can look at the tabular data behind any layer by right-clicking on an item in the Display Manager and choosing New Data View. I only want to look, in this case, for the 5-digit zip code. This data is nationwide. I don't care about the rest of the country. I just care about my stuff. So I'm going to choose your data and click OK. So here I am with Colorado customers. All of these kind of clear selections, that's your data set. Maptitude created automatically when it attached my data to the zip code boundaries. And the next column over is my Denver. The purple is Denver North, and the red is Denver South. If I scroll through this, I can see that I don't have two colored icons next to each other anywhere. So you can see which zip codes belong in each set simply by scrolling through. The other thing I could do is I could go to Denver, scroll through and check, and do that for the other sets. So in this case, because of that setting that I had, and this was this remove features from other sets, there weren't any overlaps. However, if I chose the option to allow sets to overlap, let me turn all of these back on so you can see them. Okay, so here I have all of my sets are showing for these particular territories. And my tools toolbox, I'm just going to zoom over here a little bit. So let's just say that I want to include 80422 in both Denver, what is that, Denver North? Yep, Denver North and in Denver. So it's already in Denver North, but I want to include it in Denver. Now that I have made this option to allow sets to overlap, I can simply click on this set. Now it didn't make a visible change in the color, and that's because a selection set can only have one color, and it's for the set that's drawn last. So when I go into selection settings, Denver North is drawn after Denver. So if I have a feature that's in both Denver and Denver North, it's going to inherit the style for Denver North, even though it's in both. However, if I look, and this was 60422, I think, back in that data view, I'm going to find that I have a Denver zip code that's in both sets. So the sets can overlap. And if I randomly just pick a couple more, I can actually create a territory which has overlapping zip codes. And that would be by using the same method that I did before. So I think that I answered that question. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next question, which is how can we digitize? I think that the question that's being asked here is how can you draw freehand shapes onto the map and make them a layer? The easiest way to do that is to use the ClickBands toolbox, which is located under the Tools menu in Geographic Analysis. The ClickBands toolbox allows you to draw any number of features that you want. In this case, I'm just going to draw in a couple of quick areas, and they happen to overlap. And I can then save these annotations as a layer. So I'll just call this quick, if I can spell right. And so these are now a layer that's called quick, and I'm able to go on and create a layer from there. The next question that I had was, underneath the selections that are listed, how did I get the Q1 sales to sum? And what I had done for that is in the selection toolbox, and let me pull it out, maybe you'll be able to see it more easily. For any selection set, you can set a running total field, and this is a new thing in Maptitude 2013. So for, oh, this is the wrong layer. I don't have any selection sets here, but if I make 5-digit zip code my working layer again, for Denver, I have Q1 sales picked. I can pick any of my numeric fields and get a summary for those fields. And so that was the second drop down in the selection toolbox. The next question that I have is with regards to the drive time bands and how they accommodate rush hour versus off-peak hour for the travel times. That's a great question. The streets travel times are compiled and maintained by Navtech. So that's part of the value-added functionality that you get when you get Maptitude 2013, as we're using this Navtech data set, which is greatly updated. And so if we look at this, we can see that there are speeds and travel times. I believe these travel times are average travel times, or they're estimated. It looks like it's something that was done actually internally by Caliper. So these are estimated, I believe, based upon the length of the segment and speed. So it's kind of generalized. There's probably some other calculations done. If you have your own specific travel times for any segments, you could add that in, and as long as it has time in the field name, you would be able to calculate on your own time. Otherwise, it's the travel times that are provided with the data. The next question we have is how you can download GPS data. We don't have time to get to that in this session. However, there is a section in the user's guide that is directed to using GPS data. You can access this by going to the Help menu and choosing Maptitude User's Guide. In that User's Guide, you'll find information about using a GPS receiver in Chapter 20. The next question is about buffering. Buffers are bands. We didn't get to those in this particular case. Those are covered in the User's Guide. And I can show you a quick example of that as well. We'll go ahead and do that by making another map of this Denver data using the Create a Map wizard. We'll go ahead and map these records by their address. And we're just going to give this a little different name. We're not going to create a color theme, but we will create these buffers. These are circular areas that are based upon distance. And I'll create a buffer of 5 miles, 10 miles, and 15 miles, calculating population. And I've given this a name. So when I click Save, Maptitude is going to go through, locate my top customers, and then create these buffers at the specified distances. So as I zoom out, what I can see is, I zoomed way out, way more than I intended to. What I can see is that I have 3 different circles surrounding my 6 customers at 5, 10, and 15-mile intervals. I can open up the data view for these bands and get any demographics, mean household income, and other fields for each of those widths, that being 5 to 10, or 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 15. Alrighty, we're coming close on time, so I'll do my best to finish answering the questions that we have, and then we'll have to wrap this up. I also see someone asking if they can calculate the distance of a specific road. All of the road links are included in the street layer itself. However, there is a measurement tool in Maptitude, and you can measure any specified distance that you want just by clicking it in. So if I wanted to measure this part of whatever highway this is, it's not 72, I guess, it's something. I can use this measure distance tool, click along with whatever degree of precision I wish. When I double click, I'll be given the total length for that segment. And the next question, and this will be the last one, is the advantage of Maptitude compared to ArcGIS. There are actually a lot of benefits to Maptitude versus ArcGIS. Those really are better addressed by our sales team. This is meant to be a how to use the software experience, so we don't really have time to delve into that, but if you contact our sales team at sales@caliper.com, they'd be more than happy to assist you. We have concluded with the time that we have, and I do appreciate all of you attending and participating in this webinar. We do appreciate and value your feedback, so in a couple of hours you're going to be receiving an email thanking you for your attendance. It will also have a video of this session that you can download and watch again if you'd like. And there will be a link to a survey. We do appreciate your feedback. Anything that you have to say with suggestions is appreciated. So we'll be looking forward to hearing more from you. And we hope that this has been beneficial. Thank you all for attending, and I hope that you have a nice rest of your day.